Children have been among those hardest hit by the war in Ukraine. The United Nations says nearly 2/3 of all Ukrainian children have fled their homes since the invasion began. That's 4.8 million children displaced within about 7 weeks. UNICEF described the speed and magnitude of the displacement as, quote, incredible. Of those who remain in their homes, many face food shortages and school closures. That's on top of the extreme trauma of those trapped in besieged cities like Mariupol. So how are children coping under the stresses of war? DW reporter Tessa Valta met with one mother who fled Ukraine with her young son.
Now they are here in Germany, playing, as if nothing was amiss. But just a few weeks ago, life changed dramatically for Makar and his mother, Svetlana.
We wake up because we listen shooting and bombing in near Odessa, in Black Sea. It's so scary. It's crazy. Now I don't believe what happened.
The bombing and shelling of Odessa and the surrounding area drove Svetlana and her son to flee. They traveled 400 kilometers past devastated towns and villages into Romania. Now they are safe in Germany, but the images they saw are seared to their memories. The boy is traumatized. When he hears loud noises, he asks if the Russians have come here, if they are attacking us, if they are coming to shoot us, and what we should do. He asks, do we have to hide? Do we maybe have to warn others? Shelling and destruction. This was also the experience of many German children during the Second World War. Horst, who doesn't want to give his last name, was one of them. He was only 10 when he saw the bombs fall. I went out and watched them fly, and all of a sudden it went crash, and the bomb hit the field. That was quite a blow. Right then, for the first time, and thank God, never again, I felt such trembling in the legs that I could not control myself. Today, he's 94 years old, but the impact of the war remains. When you experience war as a child, you are scarred for life, and that cannot be changed. It can be suppressed, forgotten, but it comes back in dreams, it comes back in pictures, it is in the world. Svetlana and her son, meanwhile, are doing their best to cope with the uncertainty. Svetlana is a doctor and wants to get her license. Her son is due to start kindergarten soon. Right now, I want to give him the opportunity to settle in. I want to show him that everything has changed, but that he is here with me, and that everything that happens here is normal, that he is safe. No one will hurt him, as long as he is with me. Now he has time to get used to everything. While they are slowly settling in Germany, they wish the war would come to an end, and that someday they can go back home to Ukraine.
And for more on this, we're joined by Emily White, the Save the Children media manager in Ukraine. She's currently in Lviv, in the west of the country. Emily, we just heard about the situation of a boy who left Ukraine with his mom. What about the children still in the country? What challenges do they face?
Hello, well, thank you for having me on, and thank you for that really powerful report as well. I think it really brought home by linking, Hurst and Makar's story, how every war is a war on children, and no matter which context it's in. And we're seeing similar things inside Ukraine. As you mentioned before, 2/3 of the country's children have now been displaced. And I've got colleagues who are telling me about children who've walked for days, sometimes weeks, with nothing but the clothes on their back. The weather conditions have been terrible. The escalation of this conflict started in the deepest winter, and I'm in Lviv now. It's quite nice at the moment and sunny, but earlier this week it was still snowing. And children are telling our colleagues about experiences like being trapped in a basement in Mariupol for 2 weeks and managing somehow to get out. this just builds a picture of the extreme conditions that children are living in and the kind of psychological distress that they're facing. And we're at Save the Children, we're very, very concerned about their risk of long-term trauma, not to mention the danger of immediate physical harm from aerial explosions and bombardments, and huge disruption to education, separation from their families, and all the child protection risks that comes with that as well.
And what kind of help can these children expect from you and other NGOs or the government? Is it possible to get help to them?
It is. Save the Children's actually been working in Ukraine since 2014 when the war started. And we're now really expanding across the rest of the country and to respond to this huge escalating crisis that's changing by the day. I've got some colleagues who've been working tirelessly along with local grassroots organisations to get the basic immediate needs to people: food, blankets, nappies, hygiene items, and also cash assistance as well. We're giving people money to help them on their way wherever they're going. And what we're now doing as well is bringing in experts in things like child protection and mental health to support children when they're crossing the borders into neighbouring countries, and also in kind of centres around the country where we're seeing a lot of people displaced to. But you asked if help is getting in. I mean, we're doing what we can, but what we really need to happen is for the immediate end to the violence, because there are places that Save the Children and other aid workers can't get into because it's just too dangerous right now. And the only way that we can get the help to everybody who needs it is by, the war ending.
And just briefly, Emily, what else can people who are watching do to help?
People who are watching can donate to our Children's Emergency Fund. If you go to savethechildren.net, you can find a link to that. What we're now actually asking for is for people to consider the ripple effects on other children around the world of this war. I'm sure you've seen the reports about wheat prices skyrocketing and this exacerbating the already severe hunger crisis in other parts of the world. And we've had so much generous support for our work in Ukraine that we're now asking people to remember children who are going hungry, who are living in conflict in other parts of the world, like Syria and Yemen and Somalia. I mean, I've got colleagues in Lebanon who told me just months ago, before the escalation of this conflict, that already families were having to cut their daily food intake by half because of the economic crisis. And now Lebanon gets 80% of its wheat imports from Russia and Ukraine. So, you can only imagine what's going to happen to countries like that and to families there already dealing with extreme hunger. So what we're really asking everybody is to consider that, no child deserves to go hungry, and no child deserves to live in conflict.
Thank you so much. Emily White from Save the Children in Lviv, Ukraine.
Thank you.
Education officials say schools in Germany could see up to 250,000 new students as young people flee the war in Ukraine. An estimated 40,000 school-age children are already here, and many schools are setting up welcome classes to help the newcomers adjust.
Is that your pocket calculator? Yes, it is my pocket calculator. Now all together, pocket calculator.
It's a new language and a new life. These teenagers at Lessing High School fled Ukraine after Russia's invasion. 3 weeks into their German education, things seem to be going well.
I guess you could say that the welcoming class really did make things easier for me to begin with. I've seen what happens in similar situations, where the students haven't yet learned to read or write, and where they can't speak any English. That tends to make communication much, much more difficult. But it's not a problem in this class.
Being able to speak English means they can easily talk with their German classmates. For Arabiri Veselai, their story is familiar. She's a refugee who arrived in Germany 30 years ago from Kosovo. She knows the importance of being able to communicate. Today, an opportunity to leave the classroom to learn about herbs.
Yeah, I really like this school because The system of education in Ukraine and in Germany are completely different.
So we talk more. Usually when we are in Ukraine, we read and write very much.
While instilling the importance of learning German to the new arrivals, Aribiri is aware of the pressures the refugees are already under.
The half of my family are still in Ukraine. My father, my grandfather, and my uncle, they are there. And but we are calling each other. But it's really hard to think about it.
So far, these youngsters have settled into their school. But with more young refugees arriving in Germany, teachers are all too aware that there may be much bigger challenges ahead.